The Witch and the Definitely Dead Detective by Sadie Brent, Chapter 20. Questions for the Sheriff. Evie woke the next morning with the greenhouse dream still lingering in her mind like a stubborn fog. The faint scent of lavender followed her to the shop, but she chalked it up to Lizzie's herbal stock and tried to focus on the tasks at hand. By mid-morning, however, her nerves were fraying. She couldn't shake the feeling that Lizzie's death wasn't as simple as everyone believed. Why would the crypto-arcanum point me to Lizzie's grave if this wasn't something deeper? The thought gnawed at her as she prepared her morning cup of tea in the tiny kitchenette at the back of the shop. Spinks jumped onto the counter, watching her with curious golden eyes as if sensing her unease. "Don't look at me like that," she muttered. "I'm doing my best." She sighed, ruffling his ears before setting down her cup. "I need answers, Spinks, and if I can't ask Marcellus—" Her voice trailed off as an idea took root. An hour later, Evie found herself standing outside the Stony Fork Sheriff's Office. The small brick building looked quaint and unassuming, with flower boxes brimming with autumn blooms beneath the windows. She hesitated on the doorstep, adjusting her bag and brushing imaginary lint from her blouse. "This is a bad idea," she muttered under her breath. But before she could chicken out, the door opened, and Sheriff Joe Stone himself stepped out, nearly colliding with her. "Whoa there," Joe exclaimed, stepping back with a friendly grin. "Evie, right? Lizzie's great-niece?" Evie nodded, startled by the encounter. Sheriff Stone was tall and broad-shouldered, with salt-and-pepper hair and kind, crinkled eyes that softened his otherwise imposing presence. "Yes, that's me. Sorry I didn't mean to ambush you." "No ambush at all. What brings you by?" He held the door open, gesturing for her to enter. Evie stepped inside, the cool air of the office washing over her. The space was tidy and surprisingly cozy, with framed photographs of Stony Fork through the years decorating the walls. A coffee maker gurgled softly on a side table, filling the room with its rich aroma. "I had some questions about my aunt's passing," Evie began, her voice hesitant. Joe frowned slightly but nodded, motioning for her to sit on the chair near his desk. He settled into his own chair, leaning back and studying her with a thoughtful expression. "All right," he said. "What kind of questions?" Evie hesitated, her fingers twisting in her lap. "I know the official cause was a heart attack, but was there anything unusual about it? Anything that might suggest it wasn't natural?" Joe's brows furrowed, and he leaned forward, resting his arms on the desk. "What makes you ask that?" She hesitated again, not wanting to mention the crypto-arcanum or sound like she was accusing anyone outright. "I don't know," she said finally. "It's just a feeling I have. Lizzie was so healthy and active for her age, it just doesn't sit right with me." The sheriff studied her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. "Evie, I've known Lizzie for decades. She was a remarkable woman, no doubt about it. But sometimes, even the healthiest people have things going on beneath the surface that we can't see. A heart attack at her age, while sad, isn't unheard of." Evie bit her lip, sensing he wasn't going to give her much more. "I understand that, but do you remember where she was when it happened? Was she alone?" Joe's frown deepened. "She was at her house, in the greenhouse, if I recall. She called 911, but by the time the paramedics arrived, it was too late." "Did anyone else report seeing her that day?" Evie pressed gently. Joe shook his head. "Not that I know of. Lizzie lived a quiet life. She had her routine, and most folks respected her privacy." Evie nodded slowly, her mind racing. The greenhouse again. The dream wasn't just a figment of her imagination, it was connected somehow. Joe leaned back in his chair, crossing his arms. "Evie, can I ask you something?" "Of course." "Why are you so concerned about this? Is there something you're not telling me?" She froze, her pulse quickening. "No, nothing like that. I want to understand what happened. That's all." The sheriff's gaze softened, and he nodded. "I get it. Losing someone like Lizzie leaves a lot of unanswered questions. But as far as we could tell, there was nothing suspicious about her passing." Evie forced a smile and thanked him, though her mind was far from satisfied. As Evie stepped out of the sheriff's office and into the bright afternoon sunlight, she nearly collided with Mabel Roan. The older woman was dressed in a flowing purple shawl and a wide-brimmed hat adorned with faux crystals, looking every bit the stereotypical witch. "Evie! Fancy running into you here," Mabel said with a toothy grin. What brings you to the sheriff's office, Evie forced a polite smile. Just tying up some loose ends. Mabel's eyes narrowed slightly, her grin never wavering. Well, isn't that interesting? Lizzie always was a private one, wasn't she? Never did like folks poking around her business. Evie stiffened at the subtle jab but kept her tone neutral. I'm just trying to get to know her better. She left me a lot to catch up on. Did she now? Mabel tilted her head, her gaze sharp and calculating. Well, if you ever need help understanding things, you just let me know. My coven and I have a lot of insight into the, shall we say, unseen world. Thanks, I'll keep that in mind, Evie said, her smile strained. As Mabel sauntered off, Evie couldn't shake the feeling that the woman was hiding something. But what? That evening, Evie returned to Lizzie's house, her thoughts swirling with everything she'd learned or hadn't learned. The greenhouse loomed in her mind, an unanswered question she couldn't ignore. After dinner, she stood at the window overlooking the garden, the greenhouse barely visible in the fading light. Spinks rubbed against her leg, his purr a soothing hum in the quiet room. What am I missing, Lizzie? She whispered. What am I supposed to find? Her gaze drifted to the crypto-arcanum, sitting on the bed. She'd brought it home, thinking it might reveal more. The book seemed to hum faintly, as if sensing her frustration. I'll figure it out, she promised. Somehow, I'll figure it out.